Brr, I need to warm it up. And a Christmas classic is exactly what could do that for me. A heartwarming Christmas classic, just like the movie we're reviewing tonight, which is It Happened on Fifth Avenue, and it came out in 1947. It Happened on Fifth Avenue was made by Allied Artists, who was a brand new division under Monogram Pictures at the time. Monogram Pictures was known for making B movies, low budget movies at the time, and they sort of wanted to get away from that image, so they created Allied Artists. And they put a lot of money into this picture because it was Allied Artists' first film. So they sort of took a gamble with this film. So I would classify this film as obviously a romance comedy that takes place during the holidays. It stars Don DeFore as Jim, the sort of young leading male, Gale Storm as Trudy O'Connor, and Charles Ruggles as Mr. O'Connor, the sort of rich old man who, extremely rich, he says he's the second wealthiest man in the country. But Charles Ruggles was actually my favorite character in the whole film, but we'll get to that. Victor Moore, he plays the squatter, as I like to call him, or Mr. McKeever, who's a very sweet and comical character in this movie. And it's funny to note that there was a small part played by Alan Hale Jr., a young Alan Hale Jr., so we did get to see the skipper in this movie. Sort of random, but it's important to note that this film isn't exactly a full-out Christmas movie. In fact, it doesn't turn into Christmas time until I counted an hour and 12 minutes into the movie. However, it is a 2-hour movie, so I would definitely still categorize this as a Christmas classic because the second half is so good. You have lots of Christmas vibes, and you have even the New Year's Eve vibes. I've noticed with a lot of older classics, they like to have the Christmas part in the movie, and then there's also a New Year's part, and I like that a lot. I like seeing what Christmas and New Year's Eve was like back in the olden time, or well, the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I love seeing that stuff. So the setting of this movie is clearly, obviously, New York City and in Manhattan. And I love seeing that you don't see outside of, because the majority of the movie takes place in this grand mansion on Fifth Avenue, because that's where Mr. O'Connor's home is. So a lot of it takes place there, but we do get some glimpses of busy streets in New York, and you get that Christmas shopping feel. And I've always thought that New York City is the best setting for a Christmas movie, which is why Home Alone 2 is so good, and countless others that take place in New York City are so good. So let's see. The movie sort of has two stories going on, and Jim and Trudy, who are the young couple, they take up the majority of the first half. And to be honest, I didn't care for their story as much. In fact, I felt that their love story was a little bit lacking, and I felt like I felt like they fell in love a little too fast, and it was sort of unbelievable. But the second half of the movie is more about Mr. O'Connor's character and how he's sort of this old bitter man who's just all his life cared about money, and he's finally seeing that a man's wealth is not measured by how much money he has, but the love that he feels in his life and the kindness and love that is surrounded by him, which I thought was a very beautiful story. So the second half is the Christmas half and the better half of the movie, in my opinion. And the plot of the movie is it's actually a very funny and interesting story. So Trudy O'Connor, she runs away at the very beginning. She hates being this rich girl who's always relying on her family, and she runs away and she goes to her father's mansion in in on Fifth Avenue. And when she gets there, she discovers two squatters. And the squatters are Don DeFore, who plays Jim, and Victor Moore, McKeever. And I thought it was so unbelievable that she did not turn them in to the police right away. She didn't freak out. Oh my God, there's two people, strangers living in my father's mansion right now. But what she did was she acted like she was trying to break in. So she acted like she wasn't, like she didn't belong in the house. But the more the film went on, I thought, well, maybe this young girl has always sort of had a troubled life, a too sheltered life. So she's looking for some adventure and is going to play along. And also, she was probably low-key attracted to Jim. So she went along with it. And throughout the course of the movie, they just keep picking up more and more people to move in with them into this grand mansion while Mr. O'Connor is away, until finally Mr. O'Connor discovers that all these people are living there because he finds his daughter, and his daughter says, "Dad, please, if you love me, play along." So there's this hilarious scenario where he has to pretend like he's poor in his own house. In fact, one of my favorite scenes to note is when he is selling his clothes to this tailor, and the tailor is explaining to him why wool clothing is not good. And just note that scene because I laughed out loud. It was so funny, and the actor who played the tailor was so funny. He just rambles on why wool is not good material. So let's see. Like I said, I enjoyed the part where Mr. O'Connor is realizing that money doesn't buy happiness. And there's a scene where he tells his ex-wife, well, they're sort of getting back together too. He says, "You know, Mary, there are richer men than I." And he thinks this because he sees people like Mr. McKeever and how happy he is, and he has nothing. So he's realizing this throughout the movie. And it's a beautiful Christmas story, really, because we always think that Christmas time is the time of gifts and giving and giving and giving and receiving gifts, when really it's Christmas time is about love and giving back to your loved ones and just that feeling of love. And there's another quote by Mr. McKeever to Mike. He says to Mr. O'Connor, "Mike, a house, any house, is only what its occupants make it." That stuck with me a lot because I have been very fortunate to live in a happy house, and I hope all of my viewers will have that same experience of living in a happy house. Because you can live in a mansion and be extremely depressed. In fact, that's probably why we see so many celebrities having such sad lives, because they're not happy. They're not surrounded by loved ones. So let's see if I have any more quotes. Next year he's coming. Oh, spoiler alert, the ending quote. So if you haven't seen the movie, come back and watch this. The ending quote was amazing. When Mr. McKeever is finally going off, leaving the mansion, Mr. O'Connor says to his wife, he's coming through the front door next time, because Mr. McKeever still isn't aware that he was the Mr. O'Connor. So that was it was a very beautiful ending, in my opinion. So this film, I would definitely say to watch it. In fact, I think this movie is worth seeing every Christmas. I liked it quite a bit. Like I said, it was a gamble because it was Allied Artists' first, or Monogram Pictures' first big budget movie. They spent $1.2 million to make it, which was a ton to them because they usually only spent $90,000, and they made $1.8 million. So it was a good investment. It's strange because you would think that this movie would have come out in November or December, but this film came out in Easter time in 1947, but it still did well. It was up for Best Original Story for an Oscar, but it actually lost to Miracle on 34th Street, funny enough. And I think this movie's story is way better than Miracle on 34th Street, but that's just my opinion. And another interesting fact is that this was originally going to be directed by Frank Capra, but Frank Capra declined to film this, and instead he went on to make It's a Wonderful Life. And I think he was smart in doing that, because It's a Wonderful Life clearly is the winner, because it's just the Christmas classic that everyone watches pretty much every single year. Now, that's going to be it for this review, everyone. I have something a little bit different planned for my future Christmas classic reviews, so keep an eye out for that. This review's gone on probably a lot longer than I expected, but I just had a lot to say about it. But everybody, stay warm, and I'll catch you on in the next review. See you guys.